So in this lecture we're going to be looking at something really exciting now, which is how now we can interact with the content of our elements. So as a basic example in this tutorial, I'm going to show you that by clicking this button I can change the text that is here. So I click this button and you can see that the text changes, which is really exciting. So you can change so much of this, not just paragraphs. You can do this with headers, you could do this with tables, you could do this with lists, all that kind of stuff. So it's a really exciting part of it, and let's get stuck in. I'll show you how it's done. So I'll start off just without any of this, and we shall code it all together. Okay, so first of all, obviously you want to have your HTML file and your JavaScript file, and in your HTML, at the bottom of the body, using the script tag, you want to include your JavaScript file just here. So what I'm going to start off with first is just heading. So let's refresh that so it's empty. So InnerHTML, and then we do a paragraph. This is the original text. Yep. Okay. So now what we want to do, well, let's create the button as well while we're at it. Before I forget, click me to change text. Okay, so now that we have all of our HTML elements here, obviously when we're clicking this, nothing's happening yet because we haven't added any JavaScript. But you may remember quite some time ago we were talking about classes and IDs when we were going deeper into the CSS. And I said that IDs would be really useful to remember for when we get into JavaScript. So basically what we can do is in JavaScript we can give this paragraph, we could give it a class, absolutely. There's no real need to. Because we're only doing this for this specific element. So we're giving it an ID, and let's call this ID change text. So now in my JavaScript I can refer to this, and I can basically say, I can create a function that says change the inner HTML, that's what we call it, or change the content of the element that has the ID change text, for example. So let's get started with creating some kind of function that could maybe do this. So first of all, let's have a think about how to create the basic function. If you're coding along with me, top points, good on you. Have a go at just setting up the basics of a function now by yourself. Feel free to pause the video. And now together we're going to go through this. So the first thing we do in JavaScript is we write the word function. That's to say, basically, we're going to be creating a function here. And then we need to provide a function name. So I'm going to call this, let's see, what do we call the ID? We call that change text. I don't want to get too mixed up with this, so I'm going to put let's see, change function. And then I'm going to, I know what I'll call it. We'll call it p change for paragraph change. Okay, so then I'm going to put some empty brackets, as we always do. And then I'm going to add some curly brackets. And within these curly brackets, that's where I'm going to put the instructions. So for here, this is something that you just kind of need to remember how to do. So first of all, you say document dot, then get element by ID. Okay, so that might feel a bit long, but basically what it's saying is go into the document and get an element by the ID. Then in brackets you give the ID name. So our ID name is going to be change text. I'm going to copy and paste it just to make sure I've got no typos. So in this first bit what we're doing, document dot get element by ID, and then the name of the ID. Basically we're in this function, we're basically just accessing that ID, the ID of that element. And then we're going to do dot inner HTML. And all we're doing here is we're basically saying the inner HTML, so we're saying change the content of this element, and now I'm going to put in new text. So just to go over what we've done here, I'm going to put a semicolon at the end for good practice. So I'm creating a function, I'm giving the function a name called pChange with the empty brackets, and then this first part, document.getElement by ID, and then giving the ID name, I'm basically just accessing this element, because that has the ID of change text. Once I've accessed it, I'm saying change the inner HTML or change the content, and then I'm giving what the new content should look like. So now that I've created this function, I just need to connect that to this button. So I'm going to do what we've done before, the old onClick. Let me put in the name of the function, which is pChange, empty brackets. Now just notice one little thing. At the HTML, I need to put equals rather than a bracket. So document.getElement by ID, the ID name, then .InnerHTML, and then equals the new text that we want. Okay, and now we've just added a button and we've connected that with the function pChange. So what should work now? There we go. So now when we click the button, the text is changing just fine. Okay, so what have we done in this lecture? Essentially, we created a paragraph, and let's just say, just to show you, this doesn't have to be a paragraph, it can be, there we go, it can be a header, for example. Still going to do the exact same thing. So we gave an element, let's say, we gave it an ID, and then we used the ID in our JavaScript. So we used, in our function that we created, we used document.getElementById, then we gave it the ID name, then we used .InnerHTML equals and the new text. Then all we had to do was connect this function with the button that we created here. So that's quite a lot to remember. So what I recommend you do is maybe go over this lecture again if you're not feeling too confident. Get to the point where you can create this by yourself. You can create a header or a paragraph or something, and then you can create a function in your JavaScript that changes the text when you click on a button. So give it a go, and I'll see you in the next lecture.